Hello to all my fans and friends, I'm the Pyjama Critic, and since research has shown that crowds will return to watch subsequent projects if they are effectively the same thing you did before and repeat, I'm still here in the Slumber Lounge talking about movies. I have talked about sequels on this show before, and I do feel that the best kind of sequels are those which take the same characters and premise in a new direction, rather than just copying the first movie and moving the action to a new city, or, as often happens in horror, putting a new set of victims in the same situation as before. However, box office takings would suggest that there are a lot of people across the world who disagree with me on that one. But you have to ask, is it possible for a horror sequel to do both at the same time? Surely not, you may say, because these two concepts must surely be mutually exclusive. Well, look no further, because this particular spoof horror sequel does indeed retread the old ground with our favourite masked killer and escapee, but does so while covering a new but related topic, which by definition involves a lot of copying of the first movie. It will be easier to explain if we just get on with it and take far too close a look at Scream 2. Released in 1997, once again directed by Wes Craven and written by Kevin Williamson, starring Neve Campbell, Jamie Kennedy, Courtney Cox and former WCW World Heavyweight Champion David Arquette, the film tells the story of another masked killer inspired by the events of the first movie, who has set out to make a real-life horror sequel, once again targeting Sydney and anybody else who happened to survive the first attack. I mentioned in the previous video that there are points where the first movie doubles up on the meta, while this movie goes further with that theme as we open on a college couple going to see a brand new slasher movie that is based on the events of the first movie. So they're going to a movie based on real life murders who are passing themselves after movies. We also get this conversation.
It's a dumbass white movie about some dumbass white girls getting their white asses cut the fuck up.
It hadn't escaped the critics' attention that the entire cast of the first movie were white, apart from one newscaster who had one line. So these two characters are discussing how that is typical of horror movies at the time, while themselves subverting that particular staple just by being there.
I read my black beat too, homie. Tonight we're gonna have an all-black movie, all-black cast, all-black wardrobe, black eyes, everything, black-eyed peas.
Love how the white guy serving them just has no idea how to respond to that. Like, he's clearly joking, so should I laugh? But wouldn't that be making light of racism? But if I don't react, will that look like I don't sympathise with this point? Okay, in you two go. Ticket collector, it's your problem now. Into the packed theatre, where the audience seem to be more in the mood for a rave, and we see the opening sequence of this movie, Stab, playing out like we remember from the first movie, but with embellished for the big screen. They've made it a dark and stormy night, added some extra jump scares, and of course find an excuse to get Casey naked.
No. Bitch, hang the phone up and star 69 his ass. Damn.
Really? All the cheering and whooping the rest of the audience members are doing, and they take issue with her speaking at that point? They both leave the movie momentarily for popcorn and a leak respectively. Between all the kids prattling around in the theatre and the mini party in the lobby, is anybody actually watching this movie? While Maureen is picking up the largest small diet Pepsi I've ever seen, Phil is in the bathroom getting impaled through a hole in the wall. Now, I can show that on YouTube because I just mean he's getting a knife thrust into his temple. While the movie within the movie shows Casey's death, almost but not quite the way we remember it, the killer makes his way back to Maureen and finishes her off. Not quite as intense as the opening of the first movie, but hits all the same notes, which fits with the theme of how, in the same way the first movie was a horror movie about horror movies, this is a horror sequel about horror sequels, and one of the rules of a horror sequel is to open up in a way that equals or outdoes the opening of the original. From there we go to the main setting of this movie, the fictional Windsor College in Ohio, where both Sydney and Randy now attend. We find out some useful things about Sydney. She sleeps with her full makeup and hairspray on. While she's setting into college life, well, she's less than sociable, although fully confident in dealing with pranksters who want to remind her of her ordeal. We also briefly meet her roommate Hallie, played by Elsie Neal, and see Cotton Weary, played by Leif Schreiber on the news, being interviewed by Kevin Williamson. This is refreshing to see because directors' cameos are quite common, writers' cameos not so much. Though it is well established he is innocent and appears to harbour no ill feeling towards Sydney, she still gets uncomfortable seeing him talk about his ordeal. Sydney catches up with the news of the murders at the movies and knows she has to talk to Randy, so goes to meet him outside his film studies lecture that he takes with Buffy and a lot of students who seem happy to blame movies for real life violence. Seems an odd quality in film students. Surely this is the belief more common among religious zealots who hate movies and want them banned. Still, we get our first sight of Mickey, played by Timothy Oliphant, who is claiming that life imitates art, which in this case was imitating life that was imitating art.
Stab 2? Who'd want to do that? Sequels suck. No, wow. Come on, man. Oh, please. By definition alone, they're inferior films.
But they get sidetracked by a discussion about the merits of sequels. Honestly, I agree with all the examples they give and could add to it. Nosferatu 2, Nightmare on Elm Street 3, The Purge Anarchy. If we could expand this out of horror and into comedies, City Slickers 2, Weekend at Bernie's 2, Three Men and a Little Lady, Look Who's Talking 2, Bill and Ted's Bogus Journey. Yes, much of the time in any given series, the first movie is the best, but it is indeed an overgeneralization just to write off all sequels as inherently bad movies. That being said, this is Jamie Kennedy and comedy sequels are not his thing. Coming out of this class, we learned two things. First, that Randy can't do a British accent.
It's starting again, Randy.
It's not. A lot of shit happens at the movies. People get robbed, shot, maimed, murdered. Multiplex is just a very dangerous place to be these days.
No idea why he does this, but he drops it just as quickly and it never comes up again. Second is that Sydney has a new boyfriend, Derek, played by Jerry O'Connell. This demonstrates just why Randy is not so likeable as a character in this sequel. In the original, he showed this unrequited desire for Sydney and it was cute and comical. Here it seems dialed up. He is outspokenly smitten with Sydney and shows open resentment of her new boyfriend. They've seemingly been growing closer as friends, mainly because they've both got nobody else left. But this side to Randy makes them uncomfortable to watch together, not to mention it's cliched, not just in horror but in all movies featuring teens. One staple of the horror sequel is that all the surviving cast from the original meet again. And so we see Gail Weathers has come to Ohio to report on the murders and is introduced to her new cameraman, Joel, played by Dwayne Martin. Camera operators are the only people she is willing to treat pleasantly. Guess that's why Kenny in the last movie was her only friend. Gail also meets an enthusiastic local reporter keen to suck up to her. This is Debbie Saltz, played by Laurie Metcalf. She appears to want to flatter Gail and get close to her for a good lead on a story.
Miss Weathers, please, it would be such an honor for me if I could just get a quote from you for my story.
Begin quote.
Great.
Your flattering remarks are both desperate and obvious.
She handles the brush-offs well, but I suppose when you spent years as Roseanne's sister, you would develop a thick skin. It's established in this scene, in case you missed it, flashing up on the stab credits at the start, that Gail has wrote a book about the murders in Woodsboro, and that's what was inspired the movie Stab. Dewey shows up and the cast is complete. Seems the years he spent around Sydney while she was his little sister's best friend have instilled in him some surrogate big brother instincts for her, so he flew to Ohio as soon as he heard the news. Gail tries to surprise Sydney by reuniting her with Cotton Weary for the first time, and it goes just as well as the last time she cornered Sydney for an interview.
Oh, Sydney, share with us, please.
Oh, I'll share with you.
Okay.
Did you get that, Althea?
Yes, I got that on film.
Then Gail comes face to face with Dewey, and we are reminded there was a plot thread left hanging from the last movie. We can take it that romance didn't pan out well, but there still appears to be some sexual tension between them. On to that night and the party at a sorority house that Haddie wants to join and has dragged Sydney along to improve her chances of getting noticed and therefore accepted. I really know very little about fraternities and sororities, we just don't have that at British universities. All I know is that they're all named using 3 Greek letters, people who want to join are called pledges, and they have to be slaves and subject to ritual humiliation before possibly being accepted. Then they all live together in this big house and party, sort of like a national organised high school clique. I don't mean to be dismissive, there's probably more to it than that, feel free to educate me in the comments below. Over the road is a much quieter sorority, the residents of which are all out in the town, leaving Randy's fellow film student alone with Pizza and Nosferatu 2. Cece, played by Sarah Michelle Gellar. Teen, alone in a house with a scary movie and a phone. We know where this is going.
We're co-sponsoring the Acid Rain Mixer at Pi Gamma Alpha tonight.
Why aren't you there?
I'm sober, sister. I need to be here in case a drunk sister calls and needs a ride.
That's too bad.
That's actually really sensible. British students just all go out drunk together, and if one of them collapses or gets lost en route, then the others just hope they remember the next morning to go looking for them. Buffy gets the threatening calls, tries to run outside, but finds the cordless phone won't work that fast, so she can't call campus security. She goes back in, nervously checks for an intruder, and is ultimately chased and caught by Ghostface, who stabs her twice and lets gravity finish the job. That quickly ends the party, and surprisingly, Debbie is on the scene before Gail.
So it's definitely not suicide. Thank you.
No, it wasn't suicide. Buffy did not stab herself in the back then jump out of an unopened window. The crowd flocking over to the scene leaves Sydney picking up her coat in an otherwise empty house. Why would you answer the phone in a stranger's house? At best, it's going to be someone you don't know asking for someone else you don't know, and at worst...
Hello?
Hello, Sydney. Remember me?
That! Whoever this new Ghostface is, they have some new tricks and are able to do the Roger Jameson voice in person, not just on the phone. They are, however, just as clumsy as before. I know I said it's good to see a killer who acts more human, but this is just slapstick at this point. Derek and Dewey go after the killer, but to no avail. Luckily, the killer is happy to leave Derek with a cut. This has the result of Sydney wanting to distance herself from Derek, but he's not too happy about that and convinces Sydney to keep him around with a romantic gesture in the dining hall. She clearly appreciates the effort, and these students are all encouraging him, are too polite to say the obvious.
I know it worries me to say. Believe me, you don't have to worry.
This is of course deliberate commentary on the way horror movies make no attempt to cast people with the appropriate abilities for their character. Jocks who barely know how to hold a ball, lifeguards who can't even perform a simple dive, and of course they rarely actually look like teens, but all the other characters pretend not to notice. That's why Derek gets this rousing applause despite sounding like a mouse being dragged by the tail across sandpaper, squealing to a microphone, after being horribly burned, and who can't sing. We get a bit more of the movie about the first movie, with Tori Spelling playing Sydney and this guy who is apparently Owen Wilson's little brother playing Billy by doing a Keanu Reeves impression.
Sid, I think you need to just deal with that and move on. I mean, when my mom left my dad, I accepted it. That's the way the cookie crumbles.
How did that dialogue end up being so close to the real events if Sydney didn't want to be interviewed about her experiences? There's this subtle reference to the first movie.
They get Tori Spelling to play Sid, and they cast Joe Blow Nobody to play me. At least you get David Schwimmer.
David Schwimmer was hoping to play Dewey, but when Courtney Cox got the role of Gail, it was decided that audiences wouldn't want to see those two getting romantically involved after seeing them in Friends for the last 3 years as brother and sister. Now Randy lays out the rules of a sequel, just like he did with the rules of the horror movie last time.
Number 1, the body count is always bigger. Number 2, the death scenes are always much more elaborate. More blood, more gore. And number 3, if you want your sequel to become a franchise, never, ever...
How do we find the killer, Randy?
Randy not getting to say what that rule is can be interpreted in many ways, but I understand it as saying there is nothing you can do to stop a horror movie spawning endless sequels. It will happen regardless. It all falls down when it gets to ascertaining the killer. The rules that will apply in the movie can't work here because the killer is whoever decided he wanted to make a sequel. Being a white male or being Sydney's boyfriend are matters of chance, not something the killer would be able to control. The real question is how to work out who the next victim is going to be, something that seems to be worrying Joel too, as he realises that being black and a side character, he's not the kind of person to survive a horror movie, sequel or otherwise.
Yeah, but I want to report the news. I don't want to be the news. Besides, brothers don't last long in situations like this.
This is national television. Think about it.
Sydney is doing her thing as a theatre major, and the meta layers up again as she's playing a murder victim on stage where she narrowly escapes Ghostface again. This scene doesn't really serve a purpose other than establishing this theatre as a location to come into play later. Meanwhile, elsewhere on campus, the rest of the Woodsboro residents are trying to make some headway with the investigation, but not getting anywhere until...
Gail's not here.
I'm not interrupting anything, am I? You three look deep in thought.
So, did the killer know Randy would answer Gail's phone, or did he just keep calling, hoping that Randy would snatch up the phone at some point? Gail and Dewey go in search of the caller, but it turns out looking for somebody with a mobile phone on an American college campus isn't much to go on. Not sure why they're trying any of these people anyway. Surely they wouldn't expect the killer to be out in the open without his costume. We get a great tension-building speech, leading to a jump scare capture, slightly let down by this gag. I generally like the humour in these movies, and the jokes usually lighten up the kills neatly, but that is a little too Nickelodeon to properly fit here. Randy is mutilated in the news van, where he is soon found by the others. Now that is how you end a scene on a comic note. Over in a library, not sure if this is at the moment of Randy getting killed or shortly after. The time frame gets a bit washier at this time in the movie, but we have to assume it's before Sydney has got the news of Randy's death, since she seems pretty calm. That is until she starts getting threatening messages on the library's local network. Ask your parents, kids. So the two detectives who have been shadowing Sydney come to her aid, having seen that the moment has come where Sydney is in immediate danger and needs the help of these officers. They leave her alone and unguarded while they go off and search the library. Luckily nobody actually attacks Sydney, but she is startled by Cotton, and we get some real insight into his character.
Let's get on with our lives. There's been enough exposure. Why would you want any more?
Why? Oh, I don't know, Sydney. I don't know. Maybe because I fucking deserve a little exposure.
He is a glory hound looking for as much exposure as possible following his wrongful imprisonment. While Sydney avoids the press at all costs, Cotton just wants to appear on as many news programmes and talk shows as possible, milking this story for all the fame and attention it is worth. Hey, everybody handles tragedy differently, and he has the opportunity to appear on a primetime talk show, but only if Sydney goes on with him, which he considers to be the least she could do for him after the year he spent on death row at her testimony. Sydney disagrees and thinks that's too much to ask, so Cotton gets just a little agitated.
Lovable and fucked up Sidney Prescott, everybody's favorite little victim. Wow! What are you doing? Keep your hand on top of your head.
Just like last time, things start falling into place to line up for the final act. Sydney and Hallie are taken into protective custody. Joel decides he's had enough of all this and resigns.
Ooh, let's see. For starters, they impounded my van. It's now an official crime scene, thanks to you.
Hey, you're the one who left us unlocked.
Here's your footage. Enjoy.
There's a curfew imposed on the college campus, and Gail and Dewey put their differences aside and team up on this investigation, starting by reviewing all of Joel's raw footage, hoping that the killer might be on there. Not at the police station, that would be too safe. Instead, they decide to wait until after dark and go to the college's edit suite in this empty and unsecure building.
Sorry.
Oh.
Oh,
Ow.
I'm sorry. Did it hurt you?
No.
The flirtation escalates and they attempt to finish what they started last year. They became a real couple during this shooting of this movie, and I think it shows in how naturally this scene comes to them.
I should be studying. You know I got a bio.
Maybe.
Dewey. Sandra Bullock is playing. Dewey.
They're interrupted by the killer, who wants to show some cut sequences of his own, and the best chase and stalking sequence of the movie ensues. We get some good old-fashioned tackles, the biggest pratfall possible, some silent stealth, and ultimately fun with soundproof booths that spell the end for Deputy Dewey. Now, with most of the original cast gone, we're almost in place for the final showdown, leaving me to announce the spoiler section of this review. As always, I'm going to talk about the ending of this movie, so if you haven't seen this yet and don't want to know how it ends, then skip to this time code. For anybody else still here, on with the final night of the action. As Sydney is taken away to an undisclosed safe place, Derek stays behind and is approached by somebody in a cloak and mask, but not the one he is dreading. Derek has given Sydney his necklace with his fraternity logo on it as a keepsake, which Derek's frat brothers consider to be a dishonour to their house and are seeking to teach him a lesson. So as Sydney is carried off in a police car, he is carried away to the theatre for some friendly torture and humiliation. Meanwhile, Sydney's protection doesn't go to plan as the car is jumped at some lights and the two detectives dispatched. This does indeed bring the body count to more than the first movie, and this is the most ostentatious kill yet, fulfilling the two rules that Randy explained earlier. This eerily quiet and tense sequence of the two girls escaping the car does leave us just waiting for the big payoff.
What?
And there it is. Back at the college, Gail runs into Cotton and becomes convinced he is the killer. Remembering the last movie, you will know that is indeed possible, because the killer can be in two places at once by the expedient of being two people at once. Gail runs into Debbie, bringing her up to speed. Sydney gets back and the killer has decided to prepare the theatre with a little ambience for the final showdown. Sydney discovers Derek has been left hanging by his brothers, and the killer shows up, revealing himself to be the horror-obsessed film student, the most obvious suspect.
Surprise, Sydney.
No, not in the least. Mickey tries to convince Sydney that Derek is his partner, but that attempt is short-lived, as is Derek. Another rule of the horror sequel that Randy didn't get around to telling us is that the killer's motivation gets more convoluted, and Mickey doesn't disappoint as he explains his plan to make himself famous.
Go on. It hasn't been done before. You see, it's just the beginning, a prelude to the trial. That's where the real fun is, because these days it's all about the trial.
Of course, we still have the question of, if not Derek, then who really is Mickey's partner?
What?
Billy's mother! Nice twist, huh? Didn't see it coming, did you?
Of course we couldn't have guessed that because we had no way of knowing who she really was. This is like Friday the 13th or Saw. Revealing this never before mentioned factor about the character is really just a step above revealing the killer to be somebody not seen or mentioned at all. Debbie is clearly the mastermind behind this whole plan as she reveals Mickey to be disposable to her by disposing of him, as well as Gail into the bargain, and revealing it was always her plan to let him posthumously take the fall.
You're never gonna get away with this.
No, of course I will. Everything's traceable back to Mickey, including the cop gun he used to kill everybody.
What gun that was used to kill everybody? It's been a knife up until now. The gun has just this moment showed up. Despite being more of a seasoned pro at this, Debbie still lets Sydney get the drop on her, in more ways than one. It's a setup, I tell you. All seems lost until Cotton Ex Machina comes in to save her, on one condition.
Let me think about this. Maybe you should too. Bet you that Diane Sawyer interview's looking real good right about now.
Consider it done.
So all is well. It turns out Gail survived, we get the obligatory final scare, Joel makes his sheepish return and Dewey lives, but this time Gail would rather go with him to the hospital than get the story. Sidney wraps things up by ensuring Cotton gets the exposure he desires.
Well, I'll tell you one thing. It'll make a hell of a movie. Thank you.
So that was Scream 2, and it's not a rare example of a sequel that surpasses the original, it's something even rarer. A sequel that stands on its own merit as an equal to the original. Where it revisits the old grounds, it does so in a way that's just as exciting as before, but the new territory covering sequel rules makes it feel a genuinely deserving continuation of the story. The main problems a sequel has are the same as the original, some confusing musical choices, certain segments that act as filler, and the odd joke that doesn't land. The one new nitpick I might have is that the ending feels somewhat rushed and the reveal could have been slightly foreshadowed. The good points are also the same as last time. A lot of good solid performances. Liev Schreiber in particular comes from a non-speaking role in the first movie and steals every scene he's in. The sequel is certainly as an equal, so just like the first movie, Scream 2 comes in as an equal 3.5 slippers. Thank you for watching. If you liked this video as much as the last one, then give us a sequel to everything you did last time. Hit that like button again, repeat your sharing and commenting habits. You can't subscribe for a second time, but anybody who hasn't should subscribe now for new reviews every week. I've been the Pyjama Critic, and remember, declaring your love in public to your college sweetheart could be a wonderful romantic gesture, but make sure you can sing first.